So good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I think I indicated I do a couple of things when I talk today. One of which is to talk about the line from the Bodhisattva vows, right? Dharma Gates are boundless, I vow to wake to them. And I also said that I would make it very clear. The very clear answer to the question that people often ask me is, how much should I practice each day? That's a perennial question that I will give a non-perennial answer to. But I'm going to start with a koan. And I'm going to start with, I could have started with almost any koan. I started to look for a koan that pertained to the subject of today's talk, and almost any one of them that I opened to was appropriate. And I took one from The Entangling Vines. People haven't probably seen The Entangling Vines yet. So those of you who are on the fast track through koan studies, here's the good news. 272 entangling vines await you if you get through the Mumonkan and Book of Serenity and the Blue Cliff Record. And sometimes also the Hidden Lamp, the 100 Women's Koans. So that much fun awaits. Don't feel like you'll run out of koans anytime soon. There are others. Anyway, Chaucho koans, there's about 500 of those that are actually wonderful little koans. Anyway. And I was originally going to read it from Entangling. The difference, of course, between this koan appears also in Mumonkan. The difference being that in Entangling Vines the koan is using the Chinese names, and in Mumonkan is using the Japanese names of the characters. But that's okay. So I will read you the koan. You know this koan probably because I've talked about it before. It's one of my favorites. One day, Tokusan came down to the hall carrying his bowls. Seppo asked him, "Old master, the bell has not yet rung, nor the drum sounded. Where are you going with your bowls?" Tokusan immediately went back to his room. Seppo told this to Ganto. Ganto said, "Great Tokusan though he is, he has not yet realized the last word." Hearing of this, Tokusan sent his attendant to summon Ganto and then asked him, "Don't you approve of this old monk?" Ganto secretly whispered his intention. Tokusan remained silent. Sure enough, the next day when Tokusan ascended the rostrum, his talk was quite different from usual. Ganto went to the front of the Zen hall, rubbing his hands together, and laughed loudly and said, "Wonderful, how happy I am that our old man has realized the last word. From now on, he'll be subject to no one on earth." Now, the other version actually ends a little differently, and it's kind of interesting. That when Ganto says that about being subject to no one on earth, and so he said, but in this version he says, "How wonderful the old fellow has grasped the final word. After this, no one in the world can do anything to him. Even so, he only has 3 years left to live." 3 years later, he died. Don't any of you try that. Anyway. But I love this koan. I'm very fond of this koan. because of Tosan that we encounter here. He's in his 80s at this point in the time of this koan. And he is deeply, deeply, deeply awakened. And of course, for those of you who've been with this koan know that this is theater, that Kanto is putting on a little play for the benefit of Seppo. And then Tokusan joins him in that play, right? In the hope that they can kind of tease him into having greater doubt, greater sort of discomfort, and dying to know what it is. What's this last word of Zen? What's the, kind of monks couldn't pull their hair out, but he would kind of be stewing about that, and that might be the thing that would kind of push him over into awakening. And so Ganto creates this little drama. Tokusan plays along with it, and even to the extent of cooperatively dying 3 years later. Okay. So what does this have to do with that line from the vows? Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to wake them. And I will, my qualifier here is, there are other versions. Margaret sent a very nice one that I liked a lot. And I just have a slight attachment to this version because this was the one I grew up with, so to speak. But it also kind of, that's the way the line is phrased, it has subtle differences. And this, I feel, speaks very directly to where I want to go today. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to wake to them. What does that mean? What are Dharma gates? As I see it, Dharma gates are invitations to practice. And when I say practice, I'm not referring to dragging out our cushions and sitting down. I never wanted to ever seem that I'm diminishing the importance of that. Zazen is the ground of our practice. It is the essential tool of our practice. But in another sense, it is only a tiny part. Our practice doesn't happen in 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day or an hour a day or 2 hours a day or however long it is you sit on the cushions. Our practice is 24 hours a day. Every day of the week, 24 hours a day. Because these Dharma gates are constantly calling us to open, to awaken, to engage. Dogen talked about the 10,000 things rising up. And they are all around us constantly, every day. What does that mean? How do we practice? This everyday, all day practice has two parts. Part one, letting go. Facing whatever situation it is with fresh eyes, with openness. We're shedding our preconceptions, our biases, our prejudices, our fears, our hopes, our longings, all gone. We greet each moment fresh and new. That's the first part of this practice. And then the second part is engaging with whatever it is that's calling to us. Is it a child that's crying? Is it an associate in our work who's stuck with a problem and needs some help? Is it a partner who's had a bad day and just needs to put their head on a shoulder? What is it that's calling to us? What is it that's waking us? What is it that's rising up to us? These things are there every moment of our lives, essentially. Calling out, wake up, wake up. Pay attention and live. Live fully. Don't hold back. When some situation needs us, give ourselves fully to it. Just as we would our practice on the cushion. Our practice on the cushion, in the sense, is the preparation for this. That's why it's important. It's not the essence of our way, but it's the preparation for it. What do we do on the cushion? We let go. We open our awareness. We don't allow ourselves to be dragged around by our thoughts and our fears and our attachments and our dreams and our delusions, right? We're just being. We're just being. Why are we effing being? We're being so we can live. This is I often come to this. This is such a misconception that somehow being mindful and paying attention has some intrinsic worth. It only has intrinsic worth if we then apply it to our lives, if we take action. I got too excited. I disconnected myself. Did you miss what? Or did people hear what I was saying? Yeah. Oh, you would have been better off missing it, but that's okay. All right. Anyway, so this is it. This is why we sit. Sitting is training, in essence. It's training for life. I think it's often misunderstood. People say, "Oh, I practice 2 hours every day." That's great. But if you aren't practicing the other 22 hours, then you're missing the entire point. We don't practice to become good sitters. We practice to become good human beings, or at least better human beings than we started out. And so this line is so beautiful. Dharma gates are boundless. We never exhaust them. They arise in every moment of our lives. There's some situation that calls to us, something that needs our attention. And if we are paying attention, we will rise to that. We will do that thing, whatever it is. We will give the hug. We will take out the garbage. We will put wood in the wood stove. Because this Dharma is made up of things that are infinitely small as well as things that are infinitely great. Our lives are made up of things that are infinitely small as well as things that are infinitely great. And really, it's sometimes impossible to distinguish which is, in fact, more or less important. And that's really not something that even is necessary to do. If we are awake, and the 10,000 things rise up to us, they tell us what we need to do. There it is, right in front of our eyes. Constantly, constantly. And it isn't always necessarily an act. It could be a passive thing. It could be take a nap. It's one of my favorite expressions of the Dharma. But, you know, there's a story about Bankei where one of the folks in his assembly falls asleep. And apparently they're snoring. And one of the senior monks starts to head over to wake the guy up. And Bankei stops them. He stops them. And he says, no, there's no need to wake them up. Do you think the unborn mind ceases to function when they're sleeping? Even in our sleep, our unborn mind is functioning. Even in our sleep, there's the possibility of being awake. So this, you know, this ultimately, this is very simple. I keep coming back to probably the same simple things over and over again. It's very simple. We love to make it complex. We are complex beings, right? We are complex beings. That's why the world is the mess that it is today. We love to make it complex, but it's not. The next thing that needs our attention will be right there. And it deserves our attention. That's the thing, right? That's where the whole mindfulness thing comes into play. It deserves our attention. You know, well, that's the greatest thing that we can offer one another is our attention. That we can offer the world is our attention. We can be there. We can recognize and acknowledge. And then when needed, we could participate in healing. When needed, we can participate in supporting. When needed, we can participate in taking care of. Just like the Dharma Gate is right there before our eyes, the thing that is needed is right there before our eyes. When our attachments and our delusions aren't so prominent that they obscure the reality around us, we can see what's needed in any moment. And we can act appropriately in any moment. So I strongly encourage you to reframe your understanding of practice. Practice is every day, all day. Practice is the most mundane things that we do and the most sacred things that we do. And that's what the world needs. The world needs us to be there, to show up, to practice, to engage. To bring kindness and understanding and love and healing to whatever situations we find ourselves in. So simple. We just can get this big, clumsy, cumbersome thing that we are out of the way long enough to do that. And that's the letting go part. We need to be letting go constantly. Where are we clinging? Where are we attaching? Where are we getting greedy? Where are we getting angry? Anger, what a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful emotion. For me, it's one of my best teachers. You know, that we have the opportunity when we start to get angry to just be aware of that anger, of that sensation, and of what it's asking us to do. And because we are aware and we know what it's asking us to do, we cannot do that thing. If we see our anger rising and we see that our anger wants us to yell, we can let go and not yell. You know, which kind of comes back to Toksan here. Those of you that remember this koan will remember that what Seppo does by turning Toksan around and correcting him and telling him to go back to his room, the bell hasn't rung yet, is incredible audacity. Toksan is the venerable head of the monastery. He's in his 80s. Who knows? You know, maybe he's arthritic and it's a struggle for him to even walk to the kitchen. And this young guy turns him around. Go, you know, no, it's too early, old man. Incredible audacity. What an opportunity to get angry. And how many lesser teachers would have whacked this guy on the head? Would have shouted at him, would have driven him out of the monastery. And Toksan is so smooth that he doesn't even see the insult. There's not enough ego there to be insulted. Guys ask me to go back to my room. I'll go back to my room. Okay. it is why I see this koan is so beautiful. Tokusan in this koan is so far evolved in his practice. He's not even having to deal with the anger because he doesn't even see the injury. Okay, I'll go back to my room. You know. But most of us, that's not the situation. We do see it. You know, that little snot. Who does he think he is? But it gives us something to aspire towards. And if we let go in each moment, if we practice in each moment, 24 hours a day, what a wonderful opportunity. Those of us that have families, hey, you have the opportunity. Those of us that have jobs, hey, you have the opportunity. Those of us that have families and jobs have more opportunities than others. There's nothing in our life that cannot be our practice. There's nothing in our life that cannot be an expression of the Dharma. There's nothing in our life that cannot be an expression of our fundamental nature, of our compassionate nature. And this is where I think that, to some extent, the concept of enlightenment is somewhat superfluous. You don't have to be enlightened to do any of the things I just described. You don't have to have an earth-shattering kensho to let go, to be aware, to live fully, to engage with the suffering and needs of other beings. No kensho required. Might be nice. It is nice, but it's not essential. We don't have to wait for that. We don't have to say, oh, you know, maybe another 10 years I'll get it. No, right now, right today, we all can fully manifest the Dharma in our lives. And as those Dharma gates arise, we can wake to them. Right now, right today, just as we are. Thank you. Before we get to comments and questions, I have to ask, Melissa, where in the world are you today? you
I'm in Ferdinand Beach, Florida, which is like the first town over the border from on the coast from Georgia. We're gonna hang out here for a month.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I don't know if I couldn't understand it all, but it's the first town in Florida after you come from Georgia. What's it? No.
Yeah. Bad connection. Kind of go. You guys are going in and out the whole time.
You are there now. Say it quickly. Where are you? Ah, okay. It's like responding to a koan. Okay. Thoughts, questions, comments, delusions, attachments.
Peter, would you say uh, if someone asked what is the purpose of practice? Well, you said you always say to let go. Would it also be your practice is attention, paying attention, and then from that attention, compassion can flow?
Yes, yes, and it's also very similar to the Zen peacemaker tenets. Right? What's the first one? Not knowing. Not knowing is letting go. Right? It's dropping off all the baggage so that we are just there. Right? Not knowing. Bearing witness. Then we're paying attention. Right? Paying attention. Bearing witness. Same thing. Right? And then they say respond with loving kindness and compassion. Yeah, that model is a similar way of stating the same idea.
Yes, yes, I do appreciate that Zen peacemaker approach. So that supports everything you've just said.
One thing I've been noticing lately in the last few days is the anger of the Ukrainians. It seems like anger is really powering the resistance, and it's I don't. It seems like it's not an ego-based anger. Somehow it's that what is happening is wrong and must be stopped, and it makes them really angry, and they are fighting and risking their lives. It's pretty amazing.
Yes, thank you, Gary. And we're going to do Tara Mantra for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia at the end of our sit today. Anger is like fire, right? And so there can be contexts in which fire is very useful. It can burn your house down or it can cook your dinner. I think we tend to demonize anger, and it can have a function. But to begin with, we have it. So it's like the fire. We can't let the fire get out of control. When the fire gets out of control, it destroys, right? It just destroys. But it's something that can harness. The fire in my wood stove is keeping me warm right now. I struggle. I mean, I struggle personally. We've spent a few minutes on this with the idea. We have created so many corrupt ideas around the concept of war. And we've created so many Orwellian doublespeak kinds of things. And that it makes it very hard to talk about. But, I struggle personally. I'm against all war, but would I say we should have laid down in World War II and just let the Nazis take the entire world? And this is, to me, is as close a parallel to that as I've seen in my lifetime. The US, we've been involved in all these ambiguous conflicts that are, may or may not have something to do with freedom, but have a whole lot to do with oil and geopolitics and territory and this is very unambiguous. These people are fighting for their homes, their lives, their children's future. And I virtually unheard of since the Second World War to have sort of that much clarity of a clear aggressor and a clear people just trying to keep their lives intact and their their homes and their culture and their children's futures. And yet people are dying. War is always horrible. When this is my perspective. When we talk about a just war or a righteous war or whatever, yeah, it might be a just war or a righteous war, and it's also horrible. And I don't, I don't believe this one can have a good outcome. There's no one, I think, who really believes that Ukraine can defeat Russia. They can hold them off for a while. They can make it very inconvenient for them. But in the end, Ukraine is going to fall. So, right, it tears at us. It tears at us. It's, Zelensky, he is such an inconvenient truth. The guy's a former stand-up comedian. He should have been on the first helicopter out of there. So Putin could rush in, install his puppet, all done, nice and clean. And instead, the comedian is standing in his streets in his t-shirt saying, I'm a dead man, but I'm here for my people. Where does he come from? I didn't know there were any human beings like that. As somebody, I was reading an Atlantic article this morning. I mean, the typical thing that happens when the regime starts to fall is the leader of the regime takes all their millions of dollars, jumps on a helicopter, and goes off to live in a palace somewhere. And this guy's not going to any palace. It's so complex. So complex. And we see the children suffering, the children in the subways crying in terror. So I have, this is a subject I have no answers on, but I have great admiration for the courage of the Ukrainian people and of their leader. It's quite astonishing. They did nothing to bring this on themselves, and
I fixed my internet, so it should be better. I'm in Fernandina Beach, by the way, if you didn't hear it, but the foreshadowing of this, of the way it affects us all in the world and where it means we're going, is just another thing I have to let go of and carry on. But it's very kind of scary. I think the first time in my adult life that it's been the war and maybe future war seems more possible. It's scary. Very scary.
it is scary. So what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Hopefully at a minimum, people who walk into Dunkin' Donuts carrying AR-15s to protect their freedom not to wear a mask are being instructed on what it really means to fight for freedom. and what freedom really means. And maybe the whole world being instructed on this is what happens if we allow autocrats to take over governments.
Yeah.
If we relinquish our power to madmen.
Mm.
You know, this is not playing around. Our own president had the capacity to do this. He just didn't have the opportunity. And thank God we had some generals who wouldn't go along. So maybe this is a good moment for the Tara mantra.
Get my,
If you have a mala you want to join, you may. Does everybody know what the Tara mantra is? No, John doesn't. Okay, very quickly. It's a Tibetan mantra. Very simple. Om Tare Tu Tare Turi Svaha. And it is to invoke compassion. Compassion in ourselves, awakening our own compassion, awakening compassion in the world. And the Tara that's in the Tara mantra is green Tara. She is a bodhisattva, the feminine embodiment of compassion in the universe. So what we're doing in this is awakening our compassion and awakening compassion in the world. And we repeat it 108 times. That's the traditional Buddhist cycle of repeating a mantra. And if you didn't get the words, you will by the 107th repetition or so. Okay. Om Tare Tu Tare Turi Svaha. 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 Om Tare Tutare 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 Turi Svaha. You know, change is a mysterious thing. We think we understand how change happens, but I think we actually understand very little when we're talking about vast chaotic systems across an entire planet. And so we somehow imagine that change has to be this sort of orderly process, this gradually building critical mass. But in fact, sometimes the change is cataclysmic. It just, a certain point is reached and it just unfolds. And I think that's the possibility that we have. As we awaken compassion, as we awaken in our hearts, and we join the others around the world who are doing the same things, I don't know what it will take, but I'd like to believe that that point will be reached. That point will be reached where the system will transform radically. So that's our job, to keep going.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Everybody, thank you. Have a good week and take care.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.